I built Mercer Corps before it had a name anyone remembered. Back then, it was just me. 3 borrowed desks, a failing coffee machine, and a rented office above a closed-down printing shop in Portland. I wrote code until sunrise, answered client calls with a blanket around my shoulders, and signed our first contract with hands that were shaking from exhaustion. Not fear. Years later, Mercer Corps had glass towers, global clients, and my portrait hanging in the executive hallway like some polished version of a woman I barely recognized. But portraits do not hear whispers. I did. If you're curious why I gave up my high-level office job to wear a gray cleaning uniform and what I discovered afterward, then hit like on this video. Where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Let's continue. After I stepped away from daily operations and took my seat on the board, the reports started reaching me quietly. Not the official reports. Of course, those were clean, polished, and useless. These were different. Assistants crying in bathrooms, engineers being talked over, support staff treated like background decoration, young managers mistaking cruelty for confidence. At first, I wanted to call an emergency meeting. I wanted names, files, consequences. Then I remembered something I learned while building the company people perform when they know power is watching. So I removed the power for 1 month. I was not Raina Mercer, founder of Mercer Corps Technologies. I was Ray, a temporary facilities worker in a gray uniform, cheap shoes, and a crooked name tag. My hair was pinned back. My watch was gone. My voice was smaller. If my company had truly become toxic, I would not find the truth in the boardroom. I would find it on the floor. You know, this story is fictional, and it was created with the support of AI to make every moment more powerful, emotional, and engaging. But behind the drama, there will be meaningful lessons waiting at the end. So stay with me. The first time I saw Nolan Pierce, he was speaking as if the entire building had been waiting for his wisdom. I was in Elevator C, the glass one that climbed along the east side of Mercer Corps' headquarters and gave a perfect view of Portland's rainy skyline. I had a spray bottle clipped to my cart, a folded rag in my pocket, and a mop bucket that squeaked every time I moved it. To anyone else, I was just Ray from facilities. The doors opened on the 11th floor. Product strategy. 3 young men stepped in. All expensive shoes, sharp jackets, and loud confidence. Nolan stood in front like a prince entering his own court. He could not have been more than 24. His badge said intern, but his posture said future emperor. You have to own the room, he told the other 2. People respect dominance. If you wait for permission, you become invisible. One of them laughed nervously. The other nodded too quickly. Nolan lifted his iced coffee as if making a toast. Then he turned too fast. The cup slipped. Coffee burst across the elevator wall, splattered over the silver railing, and spread across the polished floor in a brown, sticky wave. A few drops landed on the toes of my cheap black work shoes. For 1 second, no one moved. In another life, my life, someone would have apologized before the cup hit the floor. But Nolan did not look embarrassed. He looked annoyed, as if the mess had personally inconvenienced him. He glanced at his watch, then at me, not really at me, through me. Hey, he said. I raised my eyes. Clean this up. Will you? His tone was flat, bored. Before someone important gets in. This looks terrible. The 2 boys behind him stared at the floor. My fingers tightened around the spray bottle. I felt the old Raina Mercer rising in my chest, the woman who had fired executives with 1 sentence and silenced boardrooms with a look. But I swallowed her. Yes. Sir, I said quietly. Nolan stepped over the spill and walked out when the doors opened. As I knelt to wipe the coffee from the floor, I understood something cold and simple. This was not an accident. This was evidence. By the end of my first week as Ray, I understood the strange power of being underestimated. A gray uniform does something to people's eyes. It teaches them to slide right past you. I could stand beside a conference table, wiping fingerprints from the glass, while managers discussed salaries, firings, and failures as if I were a chair with a spray bottle. No one lowered their voice. No one asked me to leave. To them, I was not a person. I was motion in the background. That invisibility became my education. Nolan Pierce worked mostly on the 11th floor, where the product team lived under bright lights and fake plants. Every morning, I emptied trash bins full of protein bar wrappers, cold coffee cups, and printed reports no one had bothered to read. Every afternoon, I polished the glass walls of meeting rooms and watched the little empire he was building. He was careful, but only in one direction. When Clara from finance struggled to carry a heavy box of archived files, Nolan slowed just long enough to see her. She asked softly, "Could you help me for a second?" He smiled without warmth. "Ask facilities. That's what they're here for." Then he walked away, checking his phone. 10 minutes later, Mr. Vance, the senior vice president of operations, entered the break area. Nolan changed instantly. His shoulders straightened. His voice dropped into a polished, eager tone. "Mr. Vance, I was hoping to catch you," he said. "I have some thoughts about improving the rollout timeline." Vance barely looked up from his coffee. "Send me a note. Already drafted." Nolan said, "I just wanted to make sure it landed on your radar." He even reached past me to grab Vance a stir stick, presenting it like a gift. That night, in the small apartment I had rented under my cover identity, I opened a cheap notebook and wrote one title across the first page. "The Rot," under it. I listed names, times, and incidents. Nolan Pierce dismisses peers, flatters power, humiliates support staff. By Friday, the page was full, and my anger had become organized. The moment that changed my investigation happened in the 11th floor kitchenette. Just after 10 on a rainy Tuesday morning, I was kneeling beneath the sink with a wrench in my hand, pretending to tighten a loose pipe that did not need tightening. The cabinet doors were open just enough for me to see shoes moving across the floor. I had learned that break rooms were where truth slipped out. People guarded themselves in conference rooms, around coffee machines. They forgot. Nolan walked in first. I recognized his polished brown shoes immediately. Behind him came a pair of worn sneakers that stopped near the counter. "I can't approve the update," a nervous voice said. I knew that voice. Evan Lowe, one of our junior engineers. Quiet, brilliant, and almost always overlooked. Nolan sighed. "Evan, don't start. The migration script still fails under stress testing." Evan said, "If we push it Friday, we could corrupt user records. Maybe not all of them, but enough to cause a serious problem." How serious thousands of accounts could be affected? There was a pause. I heard Nolan open the espresso machine. "Then patch it Monday," he said. "That is not how this works." "No," Nolan replied, his voice suddenly colder. "That is exactly how this works. I told Mr. Vance we were ready. If you embarrass me in the stand-up, you embarrass the entire product team. It's my code." Evan said, "It's Mercer Corps' code." Nolan snapped, "And you are a junior engineer with 6 months on payroll. I heard leadership is reviewing headcount soon. I would hate for someone to decide you are not a team player." Silence followed. From under that sink, my hand froze around the wrench. This was no longer arrogance. This was pressure. This was a boy gambling with customer trust, company reputation, and another employee's future just to protect his own image. "Finally," Evan whispered. "I'll do what I can." Nolan laughed softly. "Good. That's the attitude." When they left, I stayed under the sink for several seconds, staring at the dark pipe above me. Then I added a new line to my notebook. Nolan Pierce, willing to risk the company to look powerful. The longer I stayed inside Mercer Corps as Ray, the clearer it became that Nolan was not the disease. He was a symptom. The infection had already climbed higher. A week later, I was sent to the executive floor during a strategy meeting because someone had spilled a green smoothie near the sideboard. The room was called The Bridge, a glass-walled conference space overlooking the city. I had named it years ago because I wanted leadership to remember they were supposed to connect people, not stand above them. Now it felt like a fish tank full of sharks. I pushed my cart inside quietly. No one stopped talking. No one even paused. "We have to reduce human dependency," said Darren Cole, the director of business optimization. He stood beside a screen filled with red numbers and clean arrows. Support, reception, facilities, basic client response. All of it is bloated. A woman from finance nodded. Contract labor would lower benefit costs immediately. Exactly, Darren said. We do not need sentiment attached to line items. I bent down and wiped smoothie from the carpet while they discussed people I knew by name. People who stayed late, people who calmed angry clients, people who kept the lights on, the lobby warm, the coffee stocked, the servers clean, the meetings running. To them, those people were not loyal employees. They were expenses. Someone laughed and said, "Half the facilities team walks around all day anyway. What do they actually do?" I was 3 feet from him, scrubbing the stain his assistant would probably be blamed for. My hand stopped for just 1 second. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to say, "They clean what you spill. They fix what you break. They carry the weight you are too important to notice." But the room was still talking, so I lowered my head, finished the stain, and memorized every face. The rot had reached the boardroom doors. And now I knew cleaning one intern would never be enough. That evening, I stopped pretending the notebook was enough. Names and incidents could prove a culture problem. But if I wanted to protect Mercer Corps before Nolan's update went live, I needed documents, files, logs, the kind of evidence no charming intern could laugh away. Facilities had access to places executives forgot existed: storage closets, maintenance corridors, server rooms. The irony almost made me smile. The most guarded systems in the building still needed someone to mop the floors beneath them. At 8:40 p.m., after the 11th floor emptied and the lights dimmed into their after-hours glow, I rolled my cart toward the data center. My temporary badge opened the outer door. My old credentials, the ones no one had ever dared remove, opened the rest. The room hummed like a living thing. I set the mop bucket beside the wall, sat at a terminal, and let my fingers remember who they belonged to. Raina Mercer was not gone. She had simply been waiting. First, I pulled HR complaints, buried reports, softened language, communication concern instead of bullying, management tension instead of retaliation. Nolan's name appeared more than once, always protected by someone above him. Then I opened the restructuring folder from Darren Cole's team. It was worse than I thought. Support staff reduced, reception outsourced, facilities replaced by the lowest bidder, customer care cut in phases, and disguised as efficiency alignment. Finally, I found Nolan's private project folder. He had named it Q3 Recovery Plan. It was not a recovery plan, it was a trap. The update failure was expected. The blame path was mapped. Evan's warnings had been copied, edited, and prepared to make him look unstable. Mr. Vance would take the executive fall. Nolan would step in with a solution he had already drafted. I copied everything to a secure drive. Then I looked at the glowing screen and whispered, "Now you've given me the mop." Nolan. 2 days later. Nolan stopped being careful. It happened in the 11th floor break room just after lunch. When the smell of reheated soup and burnt coffee still hung in the air, I was changing the trash bag near the counter, my back slightly bent, my gray uniform wrinkled at the elbows, when Nolan walked in with 2 junior associates trailing behind him. They were laughing before they even reached the coffee machine. Nolan was holding a powdered donut between 2 fingers, speaking loudly about Evan and the update as if the whole department existed for his entertainment. "Some people panic because they are not built for pressure," he said. "Leadership means pushing weak people past their comfort zone." One of the associates chuckled. Then Nolan saw me. His smile changed. It became smaller, Sharper. He looked at the donut, then at his friends, and I heard him whisper, "Watch this." Before I could straighten, something soft and sticky hit the back of my head. Powder burst across my hair. Jelly slid coldly down the side of my neck and into the collar of my uniform. The room went silent for half a second. Then the boys laughed. "Oh," Nolan said, placing one hand over his chest in fake surprise. "Sorry. Ray, it slipped." I turned slowly and looked at him. "You did that on purpose." His expression hardened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Careful. Temp workers are easy to replace. One complaint about attitude, and your agency will have you gone by morning." Then he pointed at the floor. "Clean it up. That is what you are paid for." He walked out laughing. I stood there, jelly drying against my skin, my hands trembling not from shame, but from a rage so clean it felt almost calm. That night, I pulled the security footage. The investigation was over. The cleansing was about to begin. If you think Nolan Pierce was right to throw that donut on me and threaten my job, comment power wins. But if you believe what he did was cruel, humiliating, and wrong, comment stand with Ray. I'm watching the comments, because I want to know who still believes respect matters. On Monday morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, the email landed across the company like a silent alarm. Mandatory all-hands meeting. From Office of the Board, subject Strategic Culture Review and Founder Address. Every employee, contractor, department head, and executive was required to attend in the main auditorium on Wednesday at 10. The message was short, formal, and impossible to ignore. Founder Raina Mercer would be present for a special address. I was pushing my cart past the product floor when the notification hit. Phones buzzed, laptops chimed, conversations stopped, then restarted in sharp little whispers. "Raina Mercer," someone said. "I thought she only came in for board votes." "She built the original platform," another voice replied. "My professor used her architecture model in class." Then Nolan laughed. He was leaning against a desk, scrolling through the email with that lazy arrogance I had come to know too well. "Great," he said loudly. "A founder speech. Nothing says progress like a history lesson from someone who probably still thinks cloud storage is futuristic." A few people laughed because they thought they were supposed to. Darren Cole walked by with a coffee in hand and smirked. "Careful." "Nolan, she still owns enough shares to ruin your week. Please," Nolan said. "She is probably coming to bless the quarterly numbers and tell us to be kinder to the mailroom." My hand tightened around the cart handle. He had no idea. That night, I returned to my rented apartment and opened the garment bag I had not touched in weeks. Inside was a charcoal-tailored suit, sharp at the shoulders, clean at the waist, the kind of suit that made boardrooms sit straighter. I laid out pearl earrings, black heels, and the watch I had removed when Ray was born. Then I placed the secure drive beside them. The gray uniform had gathered the truth. Now Raina Mercer was going to deliver it. Wednesday morning, I entered Mercer Corps through the private side entrance. Not as Ray. The uniform was gone, the cheap shoes were gone, my hair was no longer pinned into that tired little bun. I wore the charcoal suit, the pearls, the black heels, and the expression I had once used before hostile acquisitions and impossible negotiations. By 10 o'clock, the auditorium was full. I stood behind the curtain and listened to the restless noise of hundreds of employees waiting for a speech they did not understand yet. When my name was announced, I stepped into the light. The applause began politely. Then it weakened, because I was not smiling. I found Nolan in the second row beside Darren Cole and Mr. Vance. At first, he clapped with bored confidence. Then, his eyes narrowed. Recognition moved across his face slowly, painfully, like a door opening to a room he wished had stayed locked. I leaned toward the microphone. "For the past several weeks," I said, "I have not been watching this company from the boardroom. I have been working inside it as a temporary facilities employee named Ray." A wave of whispers rolled through the room. I cleaned your spills. I emptied your trash. I listened when you thought no one important was present. Nolan's face drained of color. I saw employees ignored. I saw support staff mocked. I saw fear used as management. And I saw one intern believe cruelty was a leadership style. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me showed Nolan in the break room, laughing as the donut fell onto my head. Gasps filled the auditorium. Then I showed the files. The forced update. Evan's warnings. The plan to let the system fail. Blame Mr. Vance. And rise as the hero. I looked directly at Nolan. Your internship ends now. Security moved before he could speak. And, for once, Nolan Pierce had no room left to dominate. After Nolan was escorted out, the auditorium did not clap. Not at first. The room stayed frozen, as if everyone was afraid the wrong sound might expose them. I could see it on their faces. Some were shocked. Some were ashamed. Some were calculating how much I had seen and whether their names were already in my files. I let the silence do its work. Then I stepped back to the microphone. This is day one of the new Mercer Corps. I said, not a rebrand, not a slogan, a correction. I looked toward the executive rows, where Darren Cole sat rigid in his chair. Starting today, we begin a full independent audit of management conduct, HR complaints, compensation practices, and retaliation reports. If you built your career by stealing credit, intimidating employees, or treating support staff like furniture, update your resume. No one laughed. Second, the Q3 update is frozen until engineering signs off without pressure. Evan Lowe will lead the technical review, and no one will punish honesty in this company again. A few engineers began to clap. Quietly at first. Third, I continued, turning toward the back of the auditorium, where the facilities workers stood near the doors. Every support employee, including facilities, reception, mailroom, and customer care, receives a 20% base wage increase effective immediately. That was when the applause broke open. It started in the back, loud and real. Then it moved through the room like weather. People stood, some cried, some looked relieved, as if they had been holding their breath for years. An hour later, I returned to my old office overlooking Portland. My assistant brought in the squeaky mop bucket I had used as Ray. I placed it beside my desk, poured one glass of wine, and raised it toward the bucket, to the people who cleaned the mess. I whispered, and for the first time in years, Mercer Corps felt like mine again. Power does not reveal my character as clearly as invisibility does. This story reminded me that the way I treat people who cannot benefit me says more about who I am than any title, salary, or position ever could. From this story, I learned 3 lessons. First, I should never judge someone's worth by their uniform, job title, or social status. Second, I realized that arrogance may rise quickly, but truth has a way of catching up with it. Third, I learned that real leadership is not about control. It is about protecting people, especially those whose voices are often ignored. What about you? Did this story leave you with a lesson of your own? Share it in the comments, because your thoughts may encourage someone who needs to hear them today. And if this story moved you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share it so more people can remember that dignity matters everywhere. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I truly appreciate your time, your heart, and your voice. Take care of yourself. Be kind to the people around you. And I'll see you again in the next story.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.